What's up, guys, and thank you for joining us for the first ever Mythgard developer update. This is a big one. A lot of you have been waiting for the first expansion to come to Mythgard, and I'm so excited to say it is finally here. Not only am I excited to say that, I'm also excited to say I'm joined by two of the geniuses from Rhino themselves, Peter and Nikolai. Now we're going to jump straight over to those, and they're going to introduce themselves, kind of let you know who they are at Rhino, what they do, what their responsibilities are. And then we're going to come back and we'll dive into what this kind of developer stream is going to be tackling, what we're going to be answering, and more importantly, Rings of Immortality. So jumping over to you first, Nikolai. Obviously you said your name's Nikolai, but introduce yourself, dude, and if you could just say what your responsibilities are at Rhino.
Genius, he says. Yes, I am Nikolai, also known as Xeneth. I'm the senior designer on Mythgard, and I do a lot of random things. Everything from helping out the art director with card art direction to mechanical design and helping out with lots and lots of data entry and getting all the art into the game. Rhino's a really small studio. We all have to wear a ton of hats, so everything, including QA testing and stuff.
Nice. So you're, I believe, responsible for a lot of the design of the cards, correct?
A fair bit. It's definitely not a solo effort. The whole team contributes to the game's design, to be sure. There aren't enough of us to silo things off to that degree, but yeah.
Nice. And Peter, obviously yourself and your responsibilities at Rhino.
Hey, so I'm the original founder of Rhino and CEO. I do a lot of programming, design, really interested in card games, and everything else, that I have to do business and all that. Passion is definitely in game creation.
Nice. Good stuff. And this is a weird one because a lot of people who used to be around the Mythgard community will know that I used to stream the game, and they'll be like, what on earth is this guy doing on a developer stream? So I'm working with Rhino on the marketing and PR front for Mythgard. I'm also picking up some of the social media stuff. So there's a chance I actually had a little chat with you recently on social media. But yeah, so that's why I am here. I'm purely just a kind of a vessel to carry these two wonderful developers along and showcase what they've been working on for this past year. Now, these developer streams are going to be a monthly affair. But now, they won't always be the size of this one. Obviously, we've got the tasty news of Rings of Immortality to talk about. But there will always be a monthly developer stream. It may be talking about patch updates. It may be talking about teasers for another expansion. It may be talking about any new features coming to the game, because we know how many features are in Mythgard already. And there will always be something there to update you guys. It'll be around towards the end of each month. This one obviously being slightly different because, hey-ho, we want to tie it in with Rings of Immortality. Also, I just want to say that this isn't live. I just want to make sure that's clear to people. Main reason being because we have a very big time zone difference. That's why we couldn't do it live. So it's pre-recorded. If anyone's wondering in chat why we're not interacting with chat or reading out chat, it's purely because this is pre-recorded purely for time zone reasons, and also giveaways. There will be giveaways going on in chat throughout this stream, guys. Now, the giveaways are for Rings of Immortality packs. However, those packs won't actually be available until Saturday. So if you win a giveaway, don't get all angry and be like, oh, where's my pack? It is coming. I personally will direct message you either on Discord or through Twitch, and I will keep you updated. But your pack code will come over to you on Saturday, once the packs are available for me to pass on to you and give away. But enough of the whole formalities out the way. Let me get words out. The developer stream. Why are we here? We're here for three main reasons. Obviously, Rings of Immortality is the big one, and we get on Unsat in a minute, so don't worry. We're also here because we've got a couple more reveals tied to Rings of Immortality, and we're going to finish up talking about some competitive Mythgard. We want to kind of show you guys where Mythgard is going in the future, because I know there's a lot of players out there who like to play card games for that competitive reason, and I'm super excited to share some information. I know the guys are super excited to share that information with you about where Mythgard is looking to go in terms of competitiveness in the future. But enough now, let's get into it. Rings of Immortality. Gentlemen, I'm going to come straight over to Nikolai first. I think it's a great name, Rings of Immortality, and there's a reveal coming later on, which I think people will go, that's why it's Rings of Immortality. How early on in the kind of development process of Mythgard, we know it's been almost a year since an expansion. what part did Rings of Immortality nail as a name, and you start developing this kind of this style of expansion?
So names are really, really hard, and in this case, it goes pretty darn far back. Anyone who's been following the sort of the teasers and some of the reveals that you guys have been doing has probably seen that there's a little bit of a low-key, sort of almost Olympic sports theme to a lot of the cards in this expansion, and that's because a lot of the ideation behind it predates the pandemic, predates COVID-19. For all we knew, way back when, the Olympics were going to be not only around the time that we were originally planning the release of the expansion, but also just going to happen, period. So it kind of comes from that. It comes from the desire to theme the expansion around a big real world event. The way in which the sort of the mythological world of Mythgard is like fused with or kind of combined with the modern world is a big part of the IP. And so we were looking at sort of current events and inspirations a long time ago now at this point. And the Rings of Immortality name arose out of the combination of keeping eyes on the sort of Olympic style contest of various different pantheons clashing on the world stage, and also the actual Rings of Immortality, nice. Which we'll get to.
Yes, which we will get to. Peter, one thing jumped straight out at me of what Nikolai said, that you base this expansion around a real world event. Is that something we can expect going forwards? Like, I mean, I'm a big fan of football, and like having a World Cup event, that would be amazing, right? But no, just all jokes aside, going forward, I'm not saying every expansion. Is it something you're quite open to? Like, how fun have you found basing it off this kind of real world event and building your own lore and your own kind of mythos from Mythgard around this real world event?
As Nikolai said, I mean, it's definitely a part of what we do with Mythgard and the inspiration of Mythgard, but I don't think we will base every expansion or even most of them on real world events. I think I'm interested in seeing where the world, sort of the storyline takes us organically. And I think we will develop the story following the Rings of Immortality. And I think events will happen, right, during this the Mythgard games or whatever the games. Did we ever come up with a name for it, right, Nikolai?
The Pantheon, the Pantheonic games, yeah.
Pantheon games, yeah. Okay, so but I think that will sort of evolve the story and things will happen from there. So I think we're going to follow that for a little while, and then maybe we'll draw inspiration from another real world event. Certainly, there's a lot of interesting things going on in the world these days, and we'll let that inspire us.
Yeah, but it's rough. I mean, we're seeing firsthand here how the timing of things, there basically were no Olympics. And yeah, so it's locking sort of expansion and development to real world events could cause problems timing wise, but that doesn't mean that that there isn't room for individual cards to be influenced by real world events. That's for sure.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's that all sounds great. And I mean, we showed a trailer earlier. We're going to show the trailer again now because there may be some people who have the murmurs have been happening, shall we say, of these Pantheon games. Maybe people have been like, "Oh, what's this going on? This Mythgard game that I used to play. There's an expansion coming along." Maybe they haven't seen the trailer, so we're going to show the trailer now, and then we can jump into the actual mechanics of Rings of Immortality and really start getting people excited for the expansion. It's coming tomorrow, people. So straight after this trailer, we can dive into that. Right, guys, that was the trailer for Rings of Immortality. And as you saw at the end, it is releasing tomorrow. Obviously, depending where you are in the world. For example, if you're in the UK like myself, it's going to be very early hours of Saturday morning. If you're Pacific time or on the East Coast, then there's a chance that you actually be able to play it on the Friday. But nevertheless, by the weekend, all of us can be jumping into the Pantheon games. But what do these Pantheon games entail? Well, as we come to expect as card game fans or playing any card game, keywords are always introduced in expansion, and Rings of Immortality is no different. New keyword coming to the fray called Forge. Now, Forge is a keyword that plays around with, personally, my favourite element of Mythgard, the burning system, the way you burn cards to create mana. And I think it's personally, again, this is coming from me, I think it's great how this mechanic plays into that. Plays into such a unique mechanic built into Mythgard. So the way it works, just in layman's terms, if you burn a card that has Forge, that Forge ability then becomes activated, and then any other copy of that card in your deck automatically gets its Forge ability when it's activated. So you've got a 2/2 minion. If it's got +1/+1 Forge, if you forged it and by burning it, then all of a sudden playing it in the future, it would come down as a 3/3 because the 1/1 ability would proc. Now you're going to be seeing some cards now that will be cycling around, and they'll be kind of showcasing what Rhino have done with that keyword. And while they're cycling around and while you're kind of feasting your eyes on their delicious art, I'm going to be jumping over to the guys and I want to kind of ask them, I want to really deep dive into this Forge mechanic and where it came from. So Peter, I'm going to jump over to you first. Forge, like I said, for me, it plays on one of the best mechanics of Mythgard, the burn system. Was that something that straight away you thought, okay, first expansion, what makes Mythgard unique? The burn system, we want to make a mechanic around that. How early on did you decide to go with that kind of keyword?
Within the first day of us discussing what we wanted to do with the expansion, we already decided that we wanted to do something that riffed off of burning, right? So that was an immediate thing that we wanted to do. Forge, just a little clarification to what you said. One of the most interesting applications of Forge is that when you burn a card with Forge, the other cards with the same name on the board also get their Forge ability. So they actually work like combat tricks, and that's probably one of the best applications of Forge, is like burning a card and giving something on the board Alpha Strike or something like that. And so that's really cool. And actually, as we allowed the Q mode testers to play around with the cards, we discovered that we really didn't want to, for example, attach Forge abilities to give cards Awaken. Awaken only affects cards that you play after you Forge, and so it doesn't affect the cards on the board. And one of the strengths of Forge is like how global it is in terms of affecting cards in play, as well as the cards in your hand and the cards in deck.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I have had the very fortunate position where I have played around with some of the new cards, and it just feels so well embedded in the gameplay of it. Nikolai, going forward, I'm hoping I know the answer to this question. I'm pretty sure everyone else is hoping any answer to it. Going forward, is Forge something that you hope to build on further, despite more expansions coming in the future? Is it a keyword you look to kind of flesh out further on as you go, and maybe even as an archetype? Or is it something that you're kind of keeping to just Rings of Immortality?
We're definitely going to have to build on it. And I think you see that pattern in other CCGs as well. Like, there's very little reason to introduce a whole new keyword if you're not going to sort of leverage it. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to appear in every single expansion indefinitely. But given that this is the introduction of it, yeah, it can't just be that. Forge ties into the burn mechanic, and that is one thing that is unique about Mythgard when compared to other CCGs. But the other thing it relates to, sort of indirectly, is the deck building rules. We have that sort of unusual pyramid style, rarer cards have lower contribution rates in a deck, and it affects that. I think we wanted to see how a mechanic like this would play out across the different card rarities. And some of this is a little bit experimental, to be honest. Mythgard is different from other CCGs, as I said. This is a different keyword, and it would have been very easy to introduce a keyword that just resembles something that you'd see in another CCG. And that isn't to say that we aren't going to introduce other keywords in the future. But yeah, this one was definitely supposed to be highly Mythgard specific, a keyword that could only appear in this game specifically.
Yeah, and I honestly think that you've done a great job with it, because it is a lot of people I talk to. It's the first thing they speak about Mythgard, how good the mana system is, how much it removes that almost that element of RNG, because you're in control of your mana pool, which a lot of games don't actually give you that responsibility. And putting a keyword on that is yeah, I think it's absolutely great, and I cannot wait for people to play it tomorrow. It's going to be very cool, and especially, I think it's going to be exciting to see what people come up with Forge as a keyword, especially going into competitive Mythgard, but more on that later. Now, cards, keywords, that's all just 50% of an expansion, guys. Mythgard obviously has more to its deck building, more depth to its gameplay, and that's through powers and paths. Now, as you'd expect, we are also getting powers and paths. They're coming into this expansion, and we are getting Colosseum of Strife as the new path, and you guys can see its ability now. So, apologies if I get this wrong, because I'm so used to it. You've recently got adjustment, right? So, it starts with 4 starting life and 0 charges. Now, every time one of your minions trades into another minion, or kills another minion, I should say, you gain 1 charge. Then at the end of your turn, you spend 3 charge. You can't choose to do it. If you have 3 charges, it automatically does it. You spend 3 charges to draw a card. Now your pursuit, and draw a card, and then that card gets +1/+1 if it's a minion. If it's a spell, it doesn't get any buff on it. Your pursuit is that you start with 2 charges, and the first minion you create on the board also starts with a +1/+1. Just clarify, I have got that completely correct, guys, yes?
That sounds right to me.
Cool. So I was used to, I dabbled with it when it was the +0/+1, but I know it's now the +1/+1. And it's a very, very fun path. Now I'm going to come to Nikolai first. The path instantly to me jumps out and screams mid-range deck. Like, I very much like mid-range decks, because I'm just indecisive. I don't want to play into certain. So I like a deck that can do a bit of everything. Was that a kind of a design, like early on again? Was that something that you were like, okay, we're going to make this path that kind of could be played in a variety of different decks, rather than choosing a path that was set to play in a set deck?
If I recall correctly, the start for Colosseum of Strife was to have a minion-focused path, a combat specifically focused path, and also to have a path that's a little bit simpler than, say, Fires of Creation or Rainbow's End, which actually have a lot of moving parts. Disc of Circadia especially is like kind of out there in terms of like the impact that it has on the game, the way that it sort of integrates with it. So we wanted it to be a little bit simpler, a little bit closer to some of the simpler paths, and also have that minion focus. The rest of it kind of just arose out of that, I think. I'm not sure necessarily about the power level of it, or whether it's going to wind up in like a really broad variety of decks, or if, like you say, it's really going to be focused on mid-range. I think we'll have to keep an eye on it. We'll have to see, right? It's really hard to know. But every path that goes in has this really sort of broad, shallow impact on the game. And I know we're definitely going to have to work hard to make sure that there are still paths to support every kind of deck archetype that we want. There isn't a spell-focused path, and that has been a very difficult thing to design correctly, because we don't want to turn Mythgard into the kind of game where you have a deck that has literally no minions in it, but at the same time, it would be good to reward spell use and have a path focused in that direction. So I think Colosseum was easy to do by comparison, given the minion focus, and given the minion focus of the game. It is a very minion and positioning focused game at its core.
Yeah, no, and I like how it's led into that, like you said, that kind of, for lack of a better term or lack of a better phrase, like face minion aggro. It rewards you for wiping the board with minions. Not playing stuff like Thunderclap, because AoE spells don't count. It has to be minions trading into minions. And I like that. It prompts a play style that no other path prompts, in my opinion. And I think that's great. Peter, going forwards, we had Nikolai mentioned, obviously, the spell path, which I can only imagine how crazy hard that would be to develop. Do you guys have are you already thinking about and planning path ideas going now, or is everything just focused solely on Colosseum of Strife and Rings of Immortality?
We have like 10 path ideas in our design documents. Two of them, which are really spell focused. Originally, when we started the expansion, before we knew that it was going to be Rings of Immortality, we intended to do a spell focused path and had started work a little bit on it before we had even released the core set. When we sort of came up with the idea of Rings of Immortality and themed it, we were like, we don't want to introduce a spell focused path with this particular expansion. So we switched over to the Colosseum at that point. Definitely have quite a few ideas for paths and some that we're very excited to do. I'm not going to spoil any of them.
Not just one? Like, maybe? No, fair enough. And also, as we said, power. Every Mythgard deck, well, not every deck, but I'd recommend your deck came with a power. And the new one, I think, is great. It's one that I wouldn't say, I don't want to use the word obvious, but I think it's one that fits in very well if you look at the other ones there. And it's Protect. Give one of your minions armor until your next turn. That's not just during your turn, that carries over throughout your opponent's turn as well. Give them 1 armor. Once again, Nikolai, was this something that kind of straight away we were like, hey, let's just throw Protect in there. Armor's in the game already, let's give it power?
It's a very simple one, right? If you just run down the list of basic Mythgard abilities or keywords, and was to try to center a power on each of them, this would be one of the things. And true enough, it is actually a power that was cut from the core set. When we hit the target number of powers that we wanted to include in that, it just kind of wound up not making the cut. And it's not the flashiest, it's not the sexiest of powers. There's a little bit of an interesting attempt to have a card relate to it in the form of the corrosion spell, but the power development is even more restrictive than paths in some way because of how few moving parts they have, right? You've got to spend mana, and once per turn you've got to have an effect, and that effect needs to be a little bit less than the value of a card, like a spell or an item card. And that's a smaller space to work in. And I wouldn't be surprised if you go far enough out into the future or whatever, that the number of sort of paths that could work for the game might outnumber the number of powers, even though I think those stats are probably inverted. I think there's probably one more power than there is paths, unless I'm counting wrong. But anyway.
Nice. Well, I mean, I've always seen the powers, as like your condiment to your chips, right? Like your deck is your cheesy chips, and you just have a nice little tomato ketchup on the side. It's something that adds an element to the deck, but you have to be careful, right, not to release a power that is too strong. Like a power that's too strong, all of a sudden it just gets played all the time. And I like the fact that the moment that the power's there, I was playing earlier today, and almost every deck was using different powers because, again, it's that another jigsaw puzzle to find when it comes to your deck building. And I think that's great, and I think Protect's going to add that layer of depth into it as well, and it's going to make potentially make some of those kind of cheaper aggro decks. Give them that, I mean, it's not aggro, but it's going to give a bit more protection to more of your squishy minions. So it's definitely something I'm looking forward to see players dive into. But that's the chunk of Rings of Immortality in terms of core gameplay, what it's bringing mechanic-wise. You guys have seen card reveals over the last few weeks, showing off the cards over on social media, on streams. And we've got a couple more for you now, the final ones. It is a mythic-filled festival right here, people. It's great. I mean, the card I'm showing off, I'm super hyped for. It's the card that Peter is revealing later on that I'm waiting for people's minds to just be like, what has just happened? I'm so confused. But anyway, so we're going to jump straight into this now. We have a card each, and the card I want to kick off with is the card that I saw. So when I had the privilege of jumping in and playing some of the Q mode and playing some of the new deck, I saw this card straight away and I was like, yes, canines are getting some love, people. And this guy here, Volkov Hetman. Volkov Hetman is, I mean, I love dogs. That's no secret. I have my dog regularly around me when I'm streaming. And Volkov Hetman, give friendly canine minions have adjacent canine minions have +1/+1. Think about the amount of power ramp that already happens in canines. This thing is, I mean, it's auto include in any canine deck that you're running. That's an obvious statement. And it's just what I've played around with it, and you're going to see a game later on. You're going to see just how powerful this can make your mid game. It's a 4-drop. It's 1 green gem. The mid game, the power this thing puts out, it can turn a board into a mediocre state to all of a sudden your opponent quivering, smashing escape, and just hitting that concede button because they're like, I can't deal with this. I think it's such a great card. Peter, canines are obviously an archetype from core set. Again, was that something that did you plan to go? Okay, let's kind of maybe give each archetype a little bit of support. Or canines early on, you're like, people liked canines. There's videos out there for canines. Let's show canines some love.
Yeah, I mean, I think we thought that. Definitely, a lot of the people in the office have dogs, just like you, and love them very much. They show up all over our game.
It's a dog-focused studio.
It is. To answer this question, though, I'm going to point you at Nikolai because I think this card was definitely much more in his wheelhouse, and he designed this card.
Yeah, well, the classic canine synergy is adjacency, and like I mentioned before, Mythgard that's one of the kind of unique things about it. It has that positionality, those relationships between the minions on the board, and there's an inherent weakness to it, right? Placing minions close together makes them vulnerable to certain things. It forces them to confront some of the same slots on the enemy side, and it makes them susceptible to any sort of area of effect or like multiple hit. You know, I'm sure everyone has had their doggos wiped out by a magmatar or something in the past playing the game. I'm gonna think back, and tuning is a really difficult thing. At some point, somebody early on might have had a comment something like, what if the canine adjacency bonus on some of these doggos was +1/+2, and that was clearly too strong, right? We're dealing with the sort of CCG's laws of small numbers thing, where there's no 1.5 strength, where 1 is like not that impressive, and 2 is 2. My God, it can't bear 2. So Volkov Hetman is an opportunity to layer in basically another canine bonus on top of your canine bonus, which, as you said, can get pretty strong. It is a mythic. Mythics are supposed to be strong, so it is a little bit of an experiment in getting that tribal going, giving that tribal something that it wants to see. And you didn't ask specifically about the sort of like, I don't know, the lore or whatever you want to call it about Volkov Hetman, but another interesting aspect of it was we have a lot of imagery and a lot of things to indicate that the Vedma witches in the Draenei, the Green faction, have a lot of control. They have a lot of dominion. There's cards that show witches experimenting on werewolf soldiers. There's cards that show them directing them or ordering them around. And the Hetman is an opportunity to just give a little bit of just a window into a little more depth in the faction, kind of inject the idea that that the werewolf soldiers that belong to the Draenei army might have some of their own leadership in the mix. And yeah, I love the way the art turned out for it. It's really
stunning. I mean, the art across
hilarious.
the board in this set is absolutely stunning. It feels like, and again, this is no disrespect meant by this whatsoever, but the core set, I thought, and this is, I spoke to many people about this, the core set was stunning, and it felt like a kind of a patchwork of various types of kind of art styles, and this feels like there's a nailed vision on art, and it just sings so well. It sings so well. I say that as Braggy's Braggy's ballad is literally playing on the screen right now, but it does sing so well. It's great. I timed it perfectly. But yeah, Volkov Hetman, it's super fun, and I know people love canines. And canines are a great budget deck. They are a really good budget deck. People first starting out in the game, and crafting this mythic, like that's going to take your budget deck to a pretty competitive standard, like competitive level. So it's yeah, very, very, very fun card. Nikolai, jumping over to you now. You have a card reveal for us. What is it, my friend?
That's going to be Svin, the Gatekeeper.
Yes.
Which is a big, beefy blue mythic, and plays a little bit into the desire to kind of call out the different colors' shticks, their sort of intended strengths, as it were. Blue as a color, Norden as a faction is supposed to be into enchantments, just a little bit more into enchantments than other colors, which isn't to say that, you know, other colors, of course, are all going to have their enchantments. You know, orange deserts have their own, ideally, their own sort of windows into each card type. Each card type has to exist in every color. But in much the same way as green is supposed to have this kind of affinity for spells, blue is kind of supposed to have this affinity for enchantments. And I think everyone agreed, both internally and externally, that that wasn't coming through quite as strongly for blue. Blue came very early in the development process of the core set. There was a time when the core set consisted only of blue, red, and yellow cards. And thus, those three colors have always developmentally had extra pressure on them, in terms of having sort of more identities and more mechanics kind of crammed in them. Like, blue also has the identity of kind of the storm, like area of effect spells. And that's fine, that's its own thing. These colors don't map directly to the way that the colors work in, say, Magic the Gathering, or any other CCG, really. We were really trying to do our own thing, perhaps foolishly, but that's what it is. So really trying to put more of that enchantment affinity into blue with this guy.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, as soon as I saw this guy, I was like, oh, wait a minute, like, reduced next enchantment cost. So it was a case of, well, I can play a giant steps over onto the side of the board. I can teleport this guy across and swing for 7, like, and my giant steps costs 3 mana. Like, it's just like, I think the synergy is great. I know
Mythics,
you mentioned,
man.
Sorry,
Mythics.
Yes.
Mythics. I mean, they're just, yeah.
Yeah, they are. I know you mentioned this, like, blue very much has AoE attacks and enchantments, but I also feel blue has a lot of like movability, like a lot of movement possibilities through teleporting, through additional movement actions, and again, giving this to a mythic. And the art on this guy, this is one of my, I mean, I've got a soft spot for Thor as it is, and this guy is like right up there. Like, Thor in 20 years time, like, shaved his head off and he's had enough, and he's taken up spike ball or some cool overly testosterone sport like that, and he's just yeah, the art of this is amazing. And
as you can see from the flavor text, Sven is a nickname, right? His full name is Frolsvin, which I think sometimes for the names and the ideas for cards, like, sometimes you'll just encounter like a nice meaty, you know, this is a great Norse name, and so we really wanted to squeeze it in there. But weirdly, like, if you look into it, Frolsvin is sometimes referred to as a giant, as a Jotun, who's like a guardian or a gatekeeper to Jotunheim, the land of the giants. But in Mythgard, the Jotun, the giants, are more like elementals, are more like things like Living Mountain, right? So we kind of have our own little spin on it, so to speak. I didn't want to make this guy an elemental, but weirdly, Fjolsvin is also one of the many, many, many names, and I mean dozens and dozens of names, by which Thor is known. So, or sorry, not Thor, Odin, right? Odin.
Yeah.
Like, Odin goes by so many different names, like in the mythology in the Edda. So the Mythgard interpretation of this guy is kind of, it's a little bit in the middle, right? It's not, he isn't literally an elemental giant. He's not literally Odin. Maybe sort of a spiritual reincarnation, as it were. Strong NFL vibes with this one in terms of the art. I'm glad you liked it.
It's amazing. It's so cool. It's so cool. Now, Peter. I mean, I'm going to warn people at home now. Just sit down, put your feet on the floor, make sure you're set for this next reveal. This thing is going to blow your mind. It blew my mind. I mean, people know that I'm pretty simple when I play the game anyway, and I'm like misplay king. This thing has got misplay for me written all over it. But this card, I'm not even going to say its name. Peter, please reveal I'm going to say the card of the set, please.
So I guess you're talking about the champion.
Oh, before that,
Before that, we have the victorious podium, right?
There we go. Every games has to have a podium, right? So victorious podium, yes. What is victorious podium?
This is obviously ties in like really, really tightly with the overarching theme of the set. So Victoria's Podium is an enchantment, and as we know, enchantments are again one of the very, very unique things about Mythgard because of the positional mechanics. There's very few CCGs that can even have cards similar to the enchantments that we have in Mythgard. So it was quite obvious when we first thought of this set that we wanted to have something that ties into that. It's definitely like a cornerstone of this deck. Of this set. The thing about it that is interesting and is that as we developed it, we decided that no one wanted to open it they didn't want to buy a booster pack and open it because the Victoria's Podium doesn't work unless you have all of the other Omen cards that give you the rings. So we have there's 6 rings in this cycle, and once you get all 6 rings, it does something with the Victoria's Podium. It triggers the champion of the contest to appear. Now, so the thing is if you get the Victoria's Podium and you open it first, you're going to be kind of disappointed because you're not going to be able to use it. So we decided to make it so that you can't open the Victoria's Podium in packs. You can only craft it. That's a little odd, but I think it works. You only get it if you really want it. It's pretty easy to make it using a wild card or using essence or whatever. But so the cool thing about it is once you get all the rings, it summons this ginormous creature.
And there are 6 rings, right?
Minion onto the board.
There are 6 rings, a ring for each faction color, right?
Yes.
There's 6
yes,
rings,
and they're all generated by different cards.
And they all have their own abilities on top of them. They're not just rings in your hand, are they?
They're items, actually. Yeah. They're items. So they're usable items, which, as you probably know, function kind of like spells. They just don't get name checked by the same other cards. They're all generated by different cards in each faction, and those Omen cards are technically designed to be cards in their own right. You will probably see some of these Rings of Immortality Omens show up just on their own. But the Victoria's Podium is all about uniting them. So it would have to be a 6-color deck, right? It's an alternate win con. It was the fusion of 2 things, if I recall correctly. It's been some time, but it was exploring an alternate win con almost as a gimmick, almost as just like a fun thing to have. Other CCGs have these, obviously. Sometimes they're wrapped up into just one card that's almost impossible to fulfill the requirements. So sometimes there's something more creative that actually impacts deck building, like Hearthstone's Cthulhu. I don't think we looked at anything specific for inspiration in other card games to come up with this particular alternate win con. It got kind of built up internally, to be honest, as kind of the ultimate Timmy fantasy, like the ultimate combo that you would have. Well, the mechanics went back and forth and changed, obviously, in development, but that in its current iteration, that you would just have acquired all of these mythical rings of immortality, kind of like Infinity Gems, a little bit. 6 of them, so that's the wrong number, right? No, yeah. There's 6 Infinity Gems.
There's 6.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like a combination of Infinity Gems, alternate win cons, and combos. And if I recall correctly, the champion of the contest, that 2020 minion that pops out of the podium when you actually manage to put together all 6 of the rings, I don't even think the abilities on that thing show up in the tooltip. You'll just have to do it.
I mean, I have the abilities next to me now, but I won't read them out because it's a nice prize. Okay. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, well, you're probably just gonna toss it up on the screen or whatever. But it's.
I was saying that it will be on the screen. Yeah, it will be on the screen. So yeah, I mean,
it's not going to be easy. And it's not intended to be easy.
2020 Rush Overrun, and at the start of your turn, it gets +5/+5. Like this thing is. I mean, this thing's got Spirited Away written all over it, right? Just off you go.
There was an iteration of this where the podium just played some sort of VFX and you win. And one of our engineers didn't like that. He felt it was incredibly unclimactic. It was not a fun way to end the game. So Champion of the Contest, in theory, more fun way to end the game.
Yeah.
That's funny though that you called out that like it's still a minion technically, so it's
Yeah.
not like victory is guaranteed.
So just some questions to clear up, because I love the idea of this. I anytime there's an alternate win con that has so many hoops to go through, so it's not a simple case of doing it. I cannot wait for the first YouTube video to come out and people will be like, I done it. I got to win with Victoria's Podium.
And that's the key, right? Is it that, or that's how it dovetails into Rings of Immortality as an expansion, really, is that if we originally sort of imagined a fantastical version of the Olympics taking place between demigods and monsters, that we wanted something in the game to have that event feeling, that special event feeling. The Olympics only occurring once every 4 years. That might not be accurate for the Winter Games. I don't remember, but this isn't something that's going to happen every other game, right? So it's intended to feel like a special event, like have that festival atmosphere of like, oh, I did it! It finally happened. And it's it's difficult. It's difficult enough that pretty confident that it's going to be special. I mean, we'll definitely have to tune the crap out of everything if it winds up happening constantly, because man.
Yeah, I mean, why not? Well, maybe one day you just you make it like the win con so much less, so people can just have a crazy fun day, like the opening ceremony or the closing ceremony Olympics, and just everyone's running out with their victorious podiums and having a whale of a time. But no, I mean, so we showed off 3 cards then, very contrasting cards. Canine support. We showed off some blue movement in Svin. And obviously the big one, the Victorious Podium. People can laugh at it and say, oh, it's a meme card. It's very much a meme card, but it's a wonderful little extra win con that is going to be there. And I personally love it when games have fun. When they show that clearly having fun with the development process, and Victorious Podium definitely shows that. Now, we've actually got a little treat for you guys. We've got a little bit of gameplay that you can jump into to showcase some of the new cards. Some that you maybe even saw today. Now, this game is between 2 partners, between Noah and Tunestar. Noah is on green-blue canines, and Tunestar is on red-purple forge. The game's it's not too long, but you guys can jump in now. It's gonna just take you through. It's at full speed. You'll get an idea of how the new path, how the new power, and how some of the new cards work. But enjoy. Come right back, and we're heading into a couple of questions and then competitive Mythgard. So catch you guys straight after this game. So we have the mighty Noah facing off against Tunestar. Tunestar on the red-purple forge, and Noah running that blue-green canines. And then we can see Volk of Hetman in the opening hand of Noah, the card we revealed earlier. Noah's choosing to burn the Russian Blight and drop the Pack Trooper, obviously looking to set up that canine adjacency, as Nikolai explained earlier, which can make the deck so powerful. A nice burn there, open up the red gem for Tunestar to drop the Stagori Pup. And you'll notice that's a 3-2 Stagori Pup because Colosseum of Strife, meaning that on the pursuit, playing your first card will give it, or creating your first minion, will give it +1/+1, making that a pretty tasty Stagori Pup. We're going to see marching orders here from Noah, looking to open up the lanes, move out wide with his canines, and look to kind of really expose that tempo that canines can produce. Burn of the Mind Freak, opening up the purple gem, putting Tunestar on 2. Decisions here on what he can do. I mean, the 3-2 Stagori Pup is pretty strong on its own. It's a swing of 6 as we speak right now, obviously with the life tap, and he's going to make it a swing of 8. I mean, a swing of 8, turn 2 with a Stagori Pup in terms of the life tap and the damage. It's a pretty tasty turn 2 swing, if you ask me. Noah's here going to burn, raid the tombs, and really start to kind of build up that canine adjacency again with the Pointman buffing up those canines down. We can see, obviously, the obvious play already going forward is the Volk of Hetman next turn. The card we spoke about earlier, we can see just a Parrot comes. And a new card in the set, Ruby Raider from Tunestar. He hasn't got the Forge ability, which would give it Rush. Now, Ruby Raider, if it breaches, it does do 1 damage to all minions. And here we're going to see the Volk of Hetman. Look at this power. Buff, people. A turn 4 swing of 10. A turn 4 swing of 10. If Tunestar didn't get that life tap earlier on, the early life tap with Stagori Pup, we would see him on 14 now. It's a crazy power that Volk of Hetman brings to the K9's deck. But wings, they're going to remove them, and we can see, just as Nikolai said earlier, the adjacency is a weakness when it comes to the K9's deck. Removing that Volk of Hetman all of a sudden makes them back to, I don't want to say mediocre, but a little less powerful troops waiting over there for our little doggos to come out wide. They've obviously taken damage from the Ruby Raider. Now we're looking now to block the lanes off with an Avenging Alpha that obviously does have its proc ability, dropping it at 6/6. That's going to stop the breach ability from the Ruby Raider and also trade into both Stegori Pup and the Ruby Raider. We see a Mind Freak here, which is going to slow down the play. A double Mind Freak from Toonstar. Just saying, do you know what? Whatever you want to play next, mate, it's going to cost you a lot. If you want to burn something, you ain't going to get it back. And then both Ruby Raider and the Stegori Pup trading into those. And all of a sudden, a big board clear from Toonstar that's really starting to set up now. We can see that Colosseum of Strife now sat on 2. Once it gets to 3, he'll draw a card. If it's a minion, he'll get +1/+1. Now we're opting for the card draw there with the Raid of Tombs. Again, coming back to that K9 synergy, playing your Jason there, making it a 3/2. Using the new power on the K9, meaning it's a 4/2. We saw earlier that Toonstar is playing Trapezists. Trapezists now won't remove either of those cards. But they would obviously be removed to something like a Wings, which he is running as well. This is a tight game, only 2 points in it. A Gorgon Ellie, another new card in the set, again, doesn't have its Forged ability, which would give it Swift, but it does have a Demise ability. When it dies, your opponent takes 3 damage. It's a 5-drop, 1 red gem card. We can see the Demolition Speedway come down now on the Pointman, which would allow it to trade into Gorgon Ellie. Obviously, Noah would take 3 damage off this trade, though. It's the Demise ability of the Gorgon Ellie. Opting for the trade there. We're going to see that loss of power on the K9, because again, the K9 adjacency synergy. And the Karen Henge coming down to give it a little more power on there. The only thing that's going to remove it now is a Wings, because the Protect comes down again. Now, does Toonstar have Wings? He does, a Wings in hand. And we can see Colosseum of Strife is going to be drawing a card at the end of the next turn, and it's going to be buffing that card by 1/1. That could prove pretty vital, as this game is looking closer and closer. It's not a great Thunderclap, but it's a Thunderclap he's going to have to take. Clears the board up again. Only 1 point in this game. Panic Raider coming down. What a top deck from Toonstar. It's going to give him options going forward with card draw. Another Thunderclap. Again, it's not a great one, but it's going to stop card draw. And stopping card draw in any card game is never bad. Only 4 points in it. Does Toonstar have anything with lethal? Obviously, we know Colosseum of Strife. Racer of Shadows is going to come down at 3/2 because it must have got the 1/1 proc off Colosseum of Strife. Meaning, with an Infuse, that is going to be game, people. Wow, there we go. What a showcase of the new path. Colosseum of Strife really showing its true power then on the Stegori Pup early game. And then Panic Raider for the lethal. Back to the guys in the studio. That was a great showcase of some of the upcoming cards. So that was a cracking game there from Noah and Toonstar, and I think it's fair to say some absolutely fluky top decking at the end, which really showcased both their skill level. I'm only joking, boys, don't worry. So jumping over to some Q&A now. I've had a lot of people asking me questions. I've reached out to community, to partners, and to casual players to try and get some questions to put forward to both Nikolai and Peter on this stream, because this stream isn't just about Rings of Immortality. It's about Mythgard going forwards, and that's what we want to kind of celebrate. Mythgard, as well as the Rings of Immortality, it's coming 1.0 release. It's full launch. It's no longer an open beta. It's a fully released game, and that's something to celebrate. And there's some questions that I know the community are dying to know the answer to, and that's what hopefully we're going to clear up here now. So the first one is going to be aimed towards you, Peter. Now, it's no secret that Mythgard originally released on the 19th of September 2019, almost a year ago to the day. And we've had lots of updates in the time, but we haven't had an expansion. And lots of people have openly dropped out the game, myself included, and said that, well, I'm not playing because there's no expansion. I'm bored of the cards that are there. I've played too many hours of it now. I want something else to play. And some people watching this will be wondering why it took a year to get an expansion here, albeit it is here now. So that's kind of what I wanted to put to you, Peter, is why did Rhino take a year to bring an expansion into Mythgard?
Well, first off, that's a good question. I feel like I have to apologize a little bit to the audience for taking so long. Definitely, we viewed this first beta as a beta. We released the game without having, all of the features that we had planned on putting in. And I think we knew, of course, that the first expansion would take longer than we anticipated. You look at the other CCGs out there. Oftentimes, that first expansion it's a bit of a doozy. It's a hard one because you're scrambling to fix issues with the release and getting in those last features, and there's all sorts of reasons why it makes that process a little bit difficult. So for us, that was certainly the case. We just had things like tournaments and these other like social features and things that just came in sort of as we were developing the beta, and it really took a lot of the focus away from the expansion. I think internally we had decided, oh, we're going to make a really big core set. The core set has like 430 cards or something like that. I think more than 430 cards. We're like, oh, that should be enough to hold people over because we know this expansion is going to take long. Well, lo and behold, it took longer than we even expected. And certainly like that gap is not something that we wanted to do. I don't think we will going forward. I think a lot of the features that we wanted to get in are in the game. We really know what we're doing now. Like this is like a first company, right? It's the first game for a startup company, and we're still putting a lot of technologies in place. And as we go, those things they go online. Our whole pipeline becomes solidified, and I think at this point we're able to just crank out expansions pretty quickly. Like we have it pretty down now, and I would expect our second expansion to come like pretty much on schedule.
Nice. And as someone who put a lot of hours in originally, came back to the game, literally what you said is summed up. The features now in the game, it doesn't feel like a different game gameplay wise. Still playing the game, I'm still miss playing as much as I used to, so it's still the same game. But the actual features there, like I jumped in and looked at the tournament system, and I was blown away by the depth that kind of system added. And this is coming from someone who did step away from the game. And I just want to say now that it is when you actually get back in and you start looking at these features, like in their face, you realise what this year has been. And it's very much a foundation year, right? Getting everything in place to then kind of give that platform to then get those expansions out going forwards. Now, Nikolai, Peter did touch on this, saying that confidently you can hit schedules going forwards with expansions. Obviously, people waited a year for this expansion coming now, Rings of Immortality. I'm hoping to say they won't have to wait another year. Do you have a rough time frame of when expansion 2 can come? We're not looking for a date or anything like that, but is there a cycle you want to get into, 2 expansions a year, 3 expansions a year, or anything like that?
I think 3 expansions a year would be the eventual goal that we would be trying to ramp up to. But like you said about not being able to try, it would be premature to try to call dates to make hard and fast predictions. But it can't be another year like the year that we've just sort of been through with everything that's happened. The tournament system that you mentioned, by the way, is that is something like 10,000 man hours of engineering time that went into that or something. Peter's inherently very modest about these sort of things. It is a system that is more flexible and more comprehensive than any similar thing that showed up in a CCG, and he basically did it on his own. And it took a really long time. It has taken a really long time to do a lot of things, but it feels really good to finally be on the cusp of getting Rings of Immortality into you guys' hands. And we are definitely going to be trying to get the next expansion out much quicker than this one has been. The world in which we took the original core set, which by all counts is pretty beefy. It's a little bit bigger than some of the core sets for some other CCGs that happened at launch. The version of things where we sort of artificially shaved off a number of cards that were complete that could have been in the core set to turn those into the first expansion so that there could have been maybe a better pace in between the start of open beta and this expansion. I don't think it really appealed, right? So all the people that enjoyed Mythgard in the alpha test and got to know all of those core set cards. We definitely added cards to the core set going into beta, not a huge number. I think it would have felt pretty strange at the time for transitioning between alpha and beta to have the core set suddenly shrink, to have some of those cards be partitioned off. It felt very much at the time like, even with the size of the core set, that it wasn't necessarily hitting all the different things that we wanted to do design-wise with the game. So, yeah, I don't think we would have done it any differently, even if we'd had the opportunity to sort of space things out by kind of like artificially inserting an expansion in between open beta and Rings of Immortality. This is the form that we really would have eventually needed to take. Now we just need to carry on with this momentum that we've got right here.
Nice. Yeah, and that's exactly it. Like you said, it's removing content away from people who've been your kind of, I don't want to say diehard players, but been there from the beginning isn't a very fair step. But it's, like you said, onwards and upwards and going forwards now. Tomorrow, Rings of Immortality, and who knows what around the corner. Who knows? One last question for you guys. I'm just coming over to Peter again now. So going forwards, what can the Mythgard community... There'll be lots of players who are very excited by Rings of Immortality. I know that because I'm one of those players. And going forwards, someone will be thinking, what can we expect from Mythgard going forwards? We know that expansion can happen because that's part and parcel of any CCG. But what can we expect just from Reiner going forwards in terms of supporting Mythgard, whether it be features, events, or anything like that?
Yeah, well, first off, obviously, we're going to, as a company, focus more on delivering content now that we're released. Other than that, I think we're going to circle back to one of the things that we really were excited about when we first conceived of this game, which is competitive play. I think you can tell from playing Mythgard that it's very, very designed as a tactical game in which skill matters, which can be very different from a lot of other CCGs. CCGs inherently are sort of a balance between skill and randomness, right? And every single CCG approaches that equation differently. Some CCGs sort of go much closer to randomness, and ours, I think, of all of them, lies much more in the skill camp than possibly any other CCG out there. And so for us, we've always wanted to see people compete playing this game. We wanted to see people distinguish themselves as the best player of Mythgard. And we've seen that in all of the tournaments that have happened thus far, in that very consistently you get some players show like just how phenomenally skilled they are. Way more than I could ever hope to be. And it just leaves me, kind of agog watching these players play. But the other aspect of Mythgard also, I think, is that the simplicity in that you can watch them play and you can it's not hard to tell that, wow, they're thinking really hard about this and they're making really, really smart plays. So seeing that in a tournament environment, which is one of the reasons why we built this tournament system in the first place, and actually rewarding the top players for playing with money tournaments has been something that we've always wanted to do. So to that end, we've partnered with various people to bring you these tournaments. The first is the 983 Flashpoint tournament series, and we have some graphics or something to show for that.
Yeah, let's throw a trailer up now. A little logo reveal up now. A snazzy one, because we know that Marfius likes his snazzy little logos. But yeah, throw it up now. Peter, you're an absolute pro at this, because that is like the perfect segue, because we're literally going on to competitive Mythgard, and that is it. You've absolutely nailed it. So thank you for doing my job for me. It's very kind. But yeah, going on to kind of wrap up the stream now with the question's been on a lot of people's minds. I've seen it as I know these guys have probably seen it as well in Discords or social medias, and that kind of there's some say top 1%, but I think Mythgard encourages you to be competitive, and I don't mean that in any kind of bad way. The way, like you said, the skill level of the game, you want to improve, and by wanting to improve at a game, wanting to win, naturally makes you competitive. And the tournament system is amazing. It offers casual, it offers competitive stuff. We've just seen that the Mythgard, the Mythgard flashpoints from 983, which will cover 3 different tournaments. We're going to be looking at draft, we're going to be looking at constructed, and 2v2. Draft is coming up as first, straight after the launch of Rings of Immortality. The main reason being, it's a perfect opportunity to do it. Not everyone's going to have the card collection. It's not a keep draft. You don't get to keep the cards you pull from the draft pack, but it's cheap to get into. It's a great way if anyone's thinking, do I want to get back into Mythgard? That's the perfect opportunity to jump straight in on Sunday the 20th and just play around with it. It's a few hours, play some drafts. I know limited game players, some of my favourite pre-release events. I wish I could play this, but unfortunately I can't play because conflict of interest. But I will be watching from a distance, and I might even be jumping around games, and I might even do a little bit of streaming and semi-casting, shall we say. But anyway, that's the flashpoints. And Lee, going forwards, as PJ said, a big focus wants to be competitive Mythgard. And there's a big event coming up, right, Peter?
Oh yeah, so I guess that the flashpoints lead up to, do we have a name for it?
Mythgard Open.
The Mythgard Open.
The Mythgard Open, yes.
Right. So I've been been talking a lot about it and how we're going to set it up, and we've gone through a few names. But yeah, the Mythgard Open, that will have a $1,000 in prize pool. It'll be really interesting. It's certainly the largest prize pool that we've seen for a Mythgard game. I hope it's just a sign of what's to come in the future. And I'm really, really excited. The production values on that are going to be really high, and yeah, I think that'll be tremendous fun. Obviously right now there's no meta that has been established with any of the cards of the expansion. Rings of Immortality, I think, is going to change things quite a lot. There's going to be a lot of new strategies and new deck archetypes that we'll see. So I'm super excited to see what shakes out from that. And we've also talked about how potentially, one of the games that I like to play way back when was Legend of the Five Rings, and I think when they first started, they talked about how competitive play would shape the direction of their story, and that's something that I would be really interested in seeing happen to Mythgard.
Nice. And what better way to kind of start introducing a competitive element with a Summer Games theme? Like, it is the ultimate expansion theme to bring in a competitive element. It literally is there. It's like nations fighting for their pride, and not fighting, you know what I mean, representing for their pride. But yeah, so I mean, you pretty much answered this question, but I just wanted to check, is this for you then, for Rhino? Is this the first steps, the flashpoints leading into the Mythgard Open, the big $1,000 prize purse with the constructed tournament? Is that the first steps of Rhino taking into moving Mythgard towards a more regular competitive season?
Yeah, I really do think so. I think that's something that we want to do. We've always wanted to do it. The pieces are starting to fall into place that will allow us to do something like that. I would love to see like a world championship of Mythgard, and I would love to see a pro tour type thing. Those would all be incredibly exciting to see. And I think in many ways, Mythgard is the ideal game for it. It's something that we've always really wanted. Things like the synchronous draft mode in tournaments, or the 2v2 play. I think there's a lot of different ways that people can compete in interesting ways. I think one of the things about card games is before this they have been so 1v1 focused, which is great. But I think the 2v2 in Mythgard brings a lot to it. Allowing teams to compete against each other. It's always been really interesting. Drafting and then competing. Those are all like parts of ways that people can like show off their skill and their talent at either deck building or tactical play. So those are exciting to be able to sort of bring that to the CCG world. And I think the way we designed our 2v2 is it's really good and it's watchable. It's not slow. You don't have to wait for 3 other people to move before one person moves. Both players on the team play at the same time. So it's really quite fast paced, and you see really interesting strategies develop. So I think it's always I always want to call out 2v2 because it's such an interesting component of Mythgard that again is really unique to our game.
No, definitely. I mean, I love playing 2v2. I know there used to be a 2v2 league when I was playing back then. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. It was some of the cards kind of seeing the power they can bring to 2v2 was crazy fun. Leshy Green just coming down as like a 17-17 was just, this is the most busted free drop I've ever seen in a card game, but it's fine. It's great. I loved it. It was very, very fun, and it is very, very fun. And with the in-game tournament system, the ability to set up these 2v2 tournaments is great, and it's something that I hope happens more going forwards. Well, that's going to wrap up this stream, guys. Thank you so much for giving up your time and stopping by. I mean, you didn't give up your time. You got treated to free card reveals and even more information about Rings of Immortality. So, I'm not thanking you. I'm taking it back because you guys have been treated. But anyway, let's wrap it up. And that is going to close up this stream. But before we wrap it up completely, guys, before we say thank you to Peter and Nikolai, we've got a little treat for you guys. Mythgard Hub. Everyone knows it. It's the cornerstone of deck building and deck sharing in Mythgard. It's such an amazing resource made by the community. Every card from the Rings of Immortality expansion is available now on Mythgard Hub. That is right. You can get over there. You can theory craft. You can play around with your deck building. You can make your decks ready to import them day one. I mean, that is forward thinking, guys. So get over there now, mythgardhub.com, and check out the Rings of Immortality cards. You can look through the card art. You can just spend all evening just stroking your screen on how pretty those cards are. That's what I'm going to do with Svin, because that guy looks amazing. But anyway, enough of that weirdness. We're going to wrap it up now, guys. Before we close it out, I want to say a big thank you to Peter and Nikolai for giving up your evening, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you for shining a spotlight on all this.
No worries. And you guys enjoy Rings of Immortality over this weekend. I look forward to trying to misplay against you on the battlefield, shall we say. And head over to mythgardhub.com right now and make sure you check out those new cards. But until the next Developer Spotlight or Developer Stream, take care, stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, guys. Goodbye.